Hello, welcome to our virtual Q&A for the film anthology Small Acts. My name is Chris Lemaire, and I'm one of the programmers here at the American Cinematheque. And I'm just so happy to present this conversation with the filmmaker Steve McQueen. We were fortunate to host Steve McQueen for another virtual Q&A at the end of 2020. So today we're super happy to have him back to dive deeper into these five incredible films. Our moderator today is Jenelle Riley, who is a writer and editor at Variety. And before I turn it over to her, I just want to send a thank you to Amazon Studios just for making this event possible. All five Small Acts films are now streaming on Amazon Prime. So if you haven't seen them yet, we definitely encourage you to seek them out. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy the conversation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jenelle Riley. I'm an editor at Variety, and welcome to this American Cinematheque Q&A with Oscar-winning filmmaker and artist Steve McQueen. After making 4 stunning feature films, today's guest has somehow topped himself by making 5 excellent films with the Small Acts anthology. Now available on Amazon Prime. Please join me in welcoming Steve McQueen. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
It's funny because I always like to start at the beginning by asking people about their first job in the movie business, the first time you felt you could call yourself a filmmaker, but you really started in visual arts and short films. So I'm sort of curious, where everything began for you. Were you someone who was running around like as a kid with a camera?
Well, the artworks, not short films. It's kind of like I was always interested in moving images. I was very lucky enough to get a Super 8 camera at art school, and the advice that I got was just to look through the lens, keep on looking through the lens, and in some ways also it was a sort of evolution because I could always draw, and then I was a painter, and then movie camera. So somehow it was just for me, it was almost like an evolution, and that was it. That curiosity. It's the curiosity of movement. And then we were very fortunate in UK. We had a lot of repertory cinemas. So I used to go like 4 or 5 times a week looking at movies. And I got to looking at movies because I had this girlfriend who was a big movie buff. And that's how I got into it. Because beforehand, for me, movies were like, backseat with a girl. That's about it. I wasn't even looking at the screen. But but then, with this partner of mine who was amazing, she was just sort of educating me on film, and that was when I was 19 years old.
Really? And because this is the American Cinematheque, I would love to know specifically what were the movies or the filmmakers who really influenced you?
Well, Jean Vigo, Atalante, particularly Zero de Conduite. That turned me around. A lot of Eric Romer movies. Just a lot of French cinema. Truffaut, a lot of those kind of, Rules of the Game, a lot of those kind of interesting movies like from the 30s and stuff like that. So again, it was just one of those sort of baptism by fire in a way, because I was consumed with it all. And then Asian cinema, Paul Hao Shan and the like, and it was just incredible. So it was just all these kind of filmmakers, and again, Italian cinema, Italian sort of expressionism cinema, which is amazing, Rocconi's brothers and so forth. So what happened to me was that I understood or got an understanding of the world through cinema, how people fell in love, how people argued, how people ate, and that was it. I was hooked.
Wow. And now you've made 5 stunning movies with Small Acts. These are really personal stories of London's West Indian community during the late 60s to the early 80s. What made you want to focus on these stories in this time period and specifically in this format?
It was a pivotal moment in the establishing, the second generation as well as the immigrants who arrived in the UK. At that time. So that for when I started this in the late 60s to the sort of early 80s, this was a pivotal time of resistance and conflict and personal conflicts within families and also within the wider world outside of the front door. So for me, it was, and again, I grew up in that time. I was born in '69. And I started school in high school in '83, the same year that Leroy Logan in Red, White, and Blue joined the police force. So again, I think these are very impressionable years, and they were pivotal years for the West Indian community in sort of getting a foot into the establishment. Getting a foot into within Britain at that time.
Now, being in America, I mean, I should have better history of the world, but these seem like underrepresented stories or stories that I'm surprised I haven't heard before. Are they well known in England, or are they also kind of, underrepresented there?
Well, in the West Indian community, a lot of people know about these stories or have an idea of them. But again, those memories, things are fading. I think you have to understand how popular culture, like cinema, helps people retain a certain sense of history. I mean, the proof is Hollywood, but also how it can be sort of distorted as well.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was about sort of very important that I wanted to talk about this time and rejuvenate memories and actually introduce memories or information to people at that time. But also, first and foremost, to tell interesting stories within the format of cinema.
And where did you even begin? Are these stories you'd sort of been wanting to tell for some time, or did you kind of hit upon the idea for Small Acts and in your research uncover some of these stories?
Well, a bit of both. At a certain point, I knew I didn't want to tell, because I was thinking I didn't want to tell fictional stories. I want to tell true stories, because when in the research, it was just so interesting. And I was working with Tracy Scofield and David Tennant, the two producers. And we hired a lady called Helen Bart, who was a sort of a very interesting researcher. So as I think I was shooting Widows and other things, because we started 11 years ago on this project. Yeah, I know. Things were being discovered, things were taking time. And also I think that it's interesting because I don't think I was ready 11 years ago. I didn't have the ammunition. I didn't have the maturity or the sort of the strength in somehow to sort of carry a lot of these stories. Because again, I think, I turned 50 last year, and it was kind of interesting because it wasn't a case of getting older. It was actually a case of, I think, having a superpower, because you've seen so much in those years, and you get an understanding a little bit of how you can handle things, or at least a maturity at least, or how to sort of see things. And without that time anyway, I don't think I could have reached to a point of trying to even attempt to make these films. So yes, a little bit of research and a little bit of the stories that I wanted to tell. Firstly, I wanted to tell the story of Mangrove, and I wanted to sort of, and certain things came through about certain stories came through a lot of research as well.
I'm trying to think, 11 years ago, obviously you'd made Hunger at that point. Had you made Shame?
No, well, Hunger was 13 years ago.
Okay, so
Shame was around Shame. Shame was 2011, yeah. So around the time of Shame, just before Shame, around the time of Shame, yeah.
I mean, it's just such a hugely ambitious undertaking at any point in someone's career, but trying to imagine with one feature film under your belt jumping into this, in a way, maybe it's good that it took 11 years.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It wouldn't be possible. I think also when you think of Bobby Sands, again, that story was in sort of 1981. So it was definitely, I was that sort of a very impressionable age or time, that time from the early 80s, which obviously stuck. Certain things were sort of cemented into me at that point. Yeah, and they were a big impression.
Going in, were you familiar with the stories of, say, Alex Wheatle or Leroy Logan? Or, had you just sort of heard things here and there? Because you said you were, young when Leroy Logan.
Well, those were the two stories that came from. Because what happened originally, I thought, okay, well, I needed a writer's room. Because I thought these are the 5 stories I want to tell, so I need a writer's room. So those were the 2 stories that were sort of discovered within that time. Well, a little bit beforehand, it was Helen Bart brought me the story of Leroy Logan, and Alex Wheatle actually was one of the writers in the writers' rooms. Because what I did originally was I asked all the writers to sort of empty their handbags on the table, and I love that because people sift through stuff and you see things which they think is not unimportant, which is actually important. And Alex told us his story. And I was like, wait a minute, this is amazing. This is, Alex, would you want to write this story? And he, Alex is a novelist. He's a young people's novelist, and he, for some reason, I think it was too close to him.
Sure.
So myself and Alice Siddons took it upon ourselves to write it, with, of course, Alex's sort of help and giving us the information. So that's what happened. And again, as I said before, Red, White, and Blue, Leroy Logan's story about this black policeman was sort of introduced to us by Helen Barth, and then we met Leroy and had a conversation. That was quite intriguing, because at the same time I couldn't get my head around, at that time, a black person joining the police at that time, that very kind of heightened time. But the other three stories came from me, my aunt in Lovers Rock, and after that writing had been finished, I came up upon the idea of education.
Oh wow, that's so crazy to me. Because I know that all films are biographical to some extent, but I'm really curious about how many of these moments are taken directly from your life. I've heard, there's a scene in Education where the teacher, subjects them to kind of a torturous song, and that really happened to you?
House of the Rising Sun. The Animals version. Oh yeah, that happened. That exactly happened.
Wow.
He brought Betsy along, his guitar, and began to sort of serenade us or torture us with whatever you think you could decide. We were his audience. It was like, he was being sort of Dylan for a moment, and that was it. Yeah, absolutely. I remember that.
I'd be wary of anyone. I'd be wary of anyone who names their guitar. That seems like a red flag.
Well, I'm just making that up, but I got the impression of that guy. He was that kind of dude. Okay, I'm just bringing Betsy along with me. It was that kind of dude, strumming.
That perfectly summed it up. I knew exactly who that guy was when you said that.
Exactly.
So when you formed the writer's room, did you not already have the 5 stories you wanted to do? Did you know it was going to be 5 stories?
Mangrove I had, Lovers Rock I had. But again, it was just one of those things where I thought I needed that kind of ensemble. But then I quickly discovered that there was the 2 writers that I wanted to work with, which was Alice Siddons and Courtney Newland. So that's what happened. So after that, it just sort of, those 2 were the people I wanted to continue with. And that was it, yeah.
I'm so fascinated by the writing process, and specifically the co-writing process, because one of the things I like about writing is I don't have to work with other people.
Interesting. No. Well, I find that sometimes the opposite. Actually, I'm writing a couple of scripts now on my own for the first time. It's been extremely enjoyable. But for me, it's sort of, I'm dyslexic, so for somehow I like to sort of throw things at people and write them down, and then I write them down. So, okay, yeah, that's good, and then go back and forth. So there's a dialogue, there's a coach, there's a certain kind of coaching, as it were, and also a back and forth. I remember Billy Wilder worked like that a lot of the time with his writer, because it's a conversation, and it's kind of, sometimes I feel it's kind of it's exciting to have those sort of collaborations, because it's sort of, you push that person pushes you. It's a conversation. I find it very exciting myself, and I've been very fortunate to work with some great people, having that kind of banter, having that kind of conversation. I find it very exciting, actually, working that way. But what's happened now is I'm sort of writing on my own, which is kind of interesting too. That because it's that conversations aren't happening, but they're happening in different ways. But anyway, that's how it is. But I find it quite exciting to sort of have those sort of it's like fencing, or but you're on the same team. There you go.
Can I ask how you sort of go about finding your collaborators, and how you know that like a certain co-writer is right for a certain film? Like, how did you know Alistair was the person for Alex Wheatle, for example?
Alistair's kind of a very good researcher. He's extremely good. I mean, The Trial, for example, Mangrove. He's an extremely good researcher. He's about that. He comes from documentary film in a way. So facts, dates, and places. But also, for example, in Mangrove, what happened with that was there were no trial documents at that year. It only started doing the trial documents the year after. But Alistair found that there was a guy who attended the court case every single day. He attended the trial every day, and he worked for the North Kensington Gazette. So we had all of that documentation, but also we Kevin MacDonald, the lawyer for the Mangrove 9, before he died, we obviously we knew him. He was very extremely helpful for us. So we had all of his court documents. So again, it was Alice is sieving through that about facts, and then obviously people talking to us about what actually happened to fill in the gaps. Because I'm the kind of person, I'm interested in the things happening in between the words. Was it raining that day? What kind of rain? When did it start raining? All these things that affect the dialogue, all these things that affect a mood. And then we get into dialogue and listening and say, oh, okay, does that ring true? Because sometimes I gotta close my eyes and hear it. And if it's you gotta hear it, and then I write it. So it's one of those things. So it was a wonderful duet in a way.
I mean,
musically.
It makes sense because all 5 films, they involve all the senses. You're not just watching a film and hearing the dialogue, you're seeing the sweat on the wall. You can feel like the heat in the room. I actually, what I need to do is get a physical copy of some of your scripts and read them, because I bet it's like poetry.
Well, I think, if you read Lovers Rock, for example, you wouldn't recognize it.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't recognize it from what's written to us on the screen to some extent, because certain things you cannot translate.
Mm-hmm.
We say, okay, I need to get, I need to write, 8.5 minutes of people dancing to silly games. Well, how can you do that? I mean, you do it, you do something, but you never really get that. You never really get that. And also what to expect. I mean, how do you do certain things? Also, sometimes, look, for me, a script has to be, for me, great. But it's a point of departure. Otherwise, I might as well just make it into a comic. So what happens is the script has to be tight. I don't sort of leave anything to chance. Not at all. I find that if you cannot do that, it's going to be brilliant. If you can, hopefully, if you're lucky enough to make it brilliant, or at least attempt to. And then what happens on top of that is hopefully something. It's almost like improvisation happens along with that. Not necessarily meant, but it can happen. The magic or whatever it is. And Lovers Rock, I was cutting lines. I was cutting scenes, cutting lines, because the things were taking over. The movie was telling me what to do or how to do it, and I was just cutting stuff out.
Wow. I mean, knowing you're going to be directing these films, do you put aside your director's mind when you write, because you find that might stop you from writing something that you would worry about shooting? Or are you a fully formed filmmaker as you're writing?
I don't know. You put anything aside. I do stuff. I don't even. People call it directing. I hope my wish on a movie set. My goal on a movie set every time on a movie set is to say, action, and cut, and then we move on. That's the wish. That's the hope. So what I'm saying is that I don't really want to intervene too much, because I hope you hire great people to do the job. And all you need is to say start. Otherwise you do it yourself. But I don't know what a writer does, and I don't know what a director does. I don't know. I just sort of do stuff. So unfortunately I can't sort of divide that. I don't start writing. Oh, I can't do that. No. I go crazy. And then an explosion happens, and then this wind comes through the room.
Watching the films, even though they're separate stories, there are obviously links and connections throughout them. You can't watch Red, White, and Blue without reflecting back to, the police actions in Mangrove. And
Yes.
Alex Wheatle is influenced by C.L.R. James's books. Was that in the writing process? How conscious of you were you in building these connections, and what order did you write them in?
Well, very much. I think those kind of crossovers, you talk about a gentleman in Red, White, and Blue who doesn't get his day in court, but you start with a court case. You talk about police brutality, and then you sort of see what happens on the inside of the police. So there's a lot of those things. Even with education, there's a lot of tangible connections to each individual film. I think what you do is you talk about the history, from that time, from 1968 with Rivers of Blood speech. There was a man called Enoch Powell, who was an extraordinary racist man who got a lot of influence in the UK in 1968 when he talked about the rivers of blood, that black people will be there'll be some kind of race war, and he got a lot of traction because he was with the conservative government. So that same year, 1968, is when the mangrove put down its roots. So this reverberation of this gentleman, unfortunately, I call him, oh my goodness, person, happens throughout even to the early 80s. Even with people like sort of Eric Clapton, who supported him, and you can Google that. It's a strange time in British history, and a lot of people don't know about it. But yeah, there's all these kind of weird connections.
I love to ask writers, especially ones as prolific as you are, do you ever deal with writer's block? And if so, how do you sort of push through that?
I think when you get older, at least for me, I'm so kind of, I love people giving me questions because I love answering questions. So it's not a problem so much. Sometimes it takes a little longer to get the answer because that's how art is. You always say to yourself, why didn't I write that yesterday? Why only now, after flipping a month, do I get to this point? Well, that's just how it is. That's just how things come about. That's just how things sort of occur. So I would say, no, I just sort of, I understand the process more. I don't think what's what I'm looking for. I just understand the process better. A block isn't a block. It's just a case of waiting for the right answer to come, or going off to do something else, and then it will fall, and then it will occur. That's all.
We have to talk about your amazing casting. You are so good with actors and with discovering newer talent. I mean, obviously you have some recognizable faces as well. John Boyega has already won the Golden Globe for his performance as Leroy Logan in Red, White, and Blue. Is that are there people who are like sort of on your radar that you want to work with? And was John one of those people, or
John definitely was. I remember speaking to John with Attack the Block. I think it was the same year The Hunger came out, to be honest with you. Wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I think it was. And I met him at some do, and I just said hello. And I always had my eye on him because he was almost like a young Denzel. He had that stance. For such a young man, he was 18, or when he did Attack the Block, 18, 19. I think 18, actually. He had presence. He commanded the screen. I mean, you know a movie star when you see them because basically they hold the screen. They can eat cornflakes and be interesting. You know what I mean? And he was one of those lucky people. Yeah, and that was it. So yes, I always want to work with him. Yeah. And some other people. I would love to work with him. I would love to work with Denzel actually one day. Who knows?
Have you ever talked about it? Because that seems like a dream collaboration for both of you.
Yeah, I love to. I would love to. I think he's amazing. I think he's amazing. I think there's a few other people, but Denzel is. I think he's just extremely. He's a great artist. Great artist. Yeah.
At the same time, I love how you have people who are making like their film debut, like the lead who plays Martha in Lovers Rock, apparently first thing she's ever done. Where did you find her?
That was a great casting director called Gary Davey, and I was working. He was working with Gary Dave since 2000. We worked together since Hunger, but on this project we started in 2014, and he was telling me about certain people all that time. I mean, he was telling me about people. It was amazing. It was incredible. And Lamara, she was just, she reminds me of Juliette Binoche in a way. There's a kind of a vulnerability and a strength, and she's a star. And what touched me so much was when she told me that she never thought that she would play a lead in the movie, or even with a dream to be a love interest, because as a dark-skinned black woman, she never thought that would ever happen, and she was very emotional about it. But she did it. She took the reins, and she wrote it. It was amazing.
You also have, I'm sort of obsessed with Kenya Sandy, who plays Kingsley Smith in Education, and he had I think one small film credits. I'm not even sure it was a speaking role, and taking these actors without that much film experience and putting them front and center. I mean, does it feel like a gamble to you, or are you totally aware that they can pull it off?
He came into an audition. He was amazing, and that was it. I think also, yes, I love giving people a chance. I mean, like Shabir Krishna, the DP. I mean, he hadn't done hardly anything. I thought, yeah, okay, come and do 5 movies with me, because in some ways, you know, you got your shot, I got my shot, and it was about a belief, someone who believed in you in one way or the other. And I think that's what I want to do. I mean, I cast her before Black Panther. This has been many moons ago, and she didn't have to do an audition, because from her conversation with me, I thought, okay, no, let's give this lady a chance. She's got it. That was it, because I think you have to feel something. And as a director, that's my little bit of the superpower in a way. You sort of have to feel people. You have to sort of encourage people. You have to sort of have a sense of people. That's what it is. And, you know, you have to sort of love actors. And I love actors. I love them. I love them. I love them. Because what an admirable profession that you translate, communicate, portray humanity. I mean, it's amazing.
I was actually going to bring this up because I'm sure you probably know, but like your actors love you. They are so rhapsodic about working with you. I remember during 12 Years a Slave, Sarah Paulson talking about jumping on a plane and where, you know, she was shooting something in New Orleans and she would come in just to do these events. And she said to me, she's like, I will do anything for this man. I'm sort of curious. I mean, obviously you have a healthy respect for them, but what is the key to working with actors? To, you know, did you ever take acting classes, or how did you learn to speak to them and speak their language?
Well, I was interested in acting, but never did it.
Really?
But yeah, that's another story. But no, I never did it. I was never. That wasn't my thing. You know. But I think trust. Honestly, I think trust. And not telling them the truth, and being there for them, and encouraging them, and, you know, again, you know, they inspire me sometimes. You know, they inspire me. Okay, don't put a camera there. Put a camera here. Look at this. Oh wow, look what this person's doing. You know, it's a collaboration. It's a, you know, you think when sort of Picasso or sorry, Van Gogh is painting the sunflowers. It's a collaboration with those sunflowers. Those sunflowers are giving him something, and he's giving those sunflowers something back in return, respect. And it is about that respect, and it is about that sort of admiration. And it is about that sort of understanding, and it is about that empathy, and it is about that sort of going, you know, these people go to places where sometimes we don't want to go ourselves, and they make themselves vulnerable as well. They fall in love on screen. I mean, you know, being in love is the most vulnerable and the most bravest thing you could possibly do, because, you know, that person you fall in love with could take it away from you. So it's like a very, very brave thing to do. So as an actor, sort of, not just to sort of do the horrible things often they have to do, you know, whatever, but also the openness they have to have in the moment. So I protect them, and I you know, and also when people achieve things that go out of themselves and get to a point where they don't know where they are. For me, my job as a director is to try to help the actor become a sphere. So whatever he or she does in the scene, it's perfect. That's the sphere. There's no right way of doing it. If you're the character, then you're the character. It doesn't matter how you do it, then you become the sphere. So my job is help them to be the sphere. That's it.
Are you someone who likes to do a lot of takes? You make a lot of independent films, so I don't know if you have the opportunity to do many takes. Do you talk with the actor a lot?
Preparation. Again, you know, I kind of give this analogy a lot. It's just like, you know, being Olympic Games. You know, you train for 5 years for, you know, for the 100 meters. 4 years, sorry, Olympics, 4 years. 4 years to do the 100 meters. So all of that training, it's not about you being on the starting line for the final 100 meters. It's all that 4 years you prep to get to that moment. So if you prep, if you're trained, if you're there, so by the time you get the camera, you are in a situation where you're there. So therefore, you know, I've been very fortunate. I mean, for example, there's 2 interesting examples of that, actually. You have someone like Michael Fassbender, who's very quick. You know, he's very quick. He, you know, I do, you know, sometimes 1 take, we're done. 2, 3, 4 takes, we're done. So someone like Sarah, who takes a little bit longer, but this is to do with her ramping herself up. So wow. Everyone's wow, okay, wow. So you got someone like Michael and Sarah in the same scene, and then you have to sort of, how do you balance that? So it's interesting. So it's just how it is. I don't waste a lot of the film. So what I mean by that waste a lot of film is, I don't know. Someone said I'm fast. Apparently I'm fast. I shoot fast. Apparently, I don't know that. But all I know is that when I had a Super 8 camera in my hand, it had to, wherever I shot, had to be bloody good because it cost £3.50 a cartridge. So so in some way, I suppose what I'm trying to say in the long way is sometimes film is for me very precious. The moments we have together is very precious. My artists are very precious. I don't want to tax my artists. So let's everyone get serious. This is it. It's a tightrope walk. You're walking on a tightrope. Let's do this. It's that dangerous. It's not like spraying, a whole set because you got a digital camera and you're like, shoot. No. Let's focus. Let's concentrate. This is a craft. How do you get from A to B? How do you do this? It's a craft. It's not a confetti. I'm very precious about that. And people.
I mean, as a fan of actors, I wonder if, you're doing your job as a director on set, but if you ever have to just sort of, you get lost in the moment. I was thinking about, in Lovers Rock, there's this amazing sequence set to Janet Kay's Silly Games where the music drops out and the dancers start singing. And, it's when you're on set and that's happening, are you in work mode or is part of you just in awe of what?
Focus. Because if it's right, it's right. Don't get me wrong, it was spiritual. I felt it. It was things were going on in that room, which is unexplainable in a way. And it was spiritual. It was spiritual. There's no if, there's no but, there's no maybe. It was some kind of spirit was in that room, and it was the vibes of everyone. But at the same time, you're looking, you're looking at everything. Everyone could go crazy. I have to hold myself down. And, so I said no.
Spiritual is such a great word for it. That's the word I've been searching for, because there's also obviously there's a courtroom moment in Mangrove where the courtroom kind of becomes like a church.
Yes, it does. Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, the sort of the stand becomes the pulpit. The sort of the gallery becomes the sort of the congregation, as it were. So I think what happened was that the Black community changed that environment from a place of justice into a place of righteousness, so-called justice into a place of righteousness. That's what happened. It got changed into a church. They sort of, because at first people are sort of intimidated by all the wigs and stuff and all the sort of the tradition and the ceremony and the formality of it. Because that's interesting about this film. Because at first there's a sort of kind of it's sort of homemade. There's sort of a fluidity to it, and then at a certain point when we get to the court, it's very formal. It's standing up, sitting down. My lord, and all that kind of stuff. So how one can navigate that, but say now change it. How you can transform it, transcend that environment. That's what those guys were about.
And speaking of spiritual, I want to talk about the ending of the film Education, which is the ending of the whole series. You go out on these beautiful shots of the planets and the stars that play over the end credits. I don't want to put words in your mouth. So if you can sort of tell me what was sort of the idea behind that. I have my own theories, but.
Oh, listen to yours. I'm interested.
I mean, I feel like it's sort of putting things in a wider perspective. I don't know if that's accurate.
It is.
Okay.
It is. No, you're absolutely right. That's what it is. In the context. Let's put all this ridiculousness that we're doing on this planet, all the foolishness that we're doing on this planet, let's put it in context to the world, the universe. And also it's the image of possibility, image of the ideas and imagination and the infiniteness of the possibilities that are rightly ours, but unfortunately not all of us can exercise. And that was it, putting us in context. The silliness of unfortunately things which go on. But also for Kingsley, he's reading this amazing this book of African kings and queens or whatever it is. And it's just giving him, hey, you don't have to sort of just think of yourself in these terms. You can think of yourself in any term. That's what it's about.
I was thinking about how red, white, and blue and mangrove have a particular intensity, while something like Lovers Rock, is maybe a little looser. It's showing these places and music as a refuge. Um, as a director, how did you want the films to differ, and how did you want them to be similar?
I don't think Lovers Rock is less intense. It's just that this is, in fact, if I think quite the opposite. I think it's the intense is the sort of love and the joy and the exuberance and the in that room, because surrounding that room are sharks and alligators, the wider, broader society. So I understand, again, but this is another space for people to be. Yes, when they come out of that room and then we get red, white, and blue, there is this kind of intensity, and because that was the lies that people used to have to, and they still do have to sort of navigate. You have to navigate through the sort of, excuse me, language cesspool of the environment you're in. How do you get to safe harbor? It's heavy, but at the same time, you're brushing your teeth, you're singing your tunes, you listen to the radio. Hence, Lovers Rock. You know what I mean? And I think honestly, music saved. Without those parties, without those blues parties, I think a lot of young people had psychosis. Totally, absolutely.
Did you attend parties like that yourself?
Yes,
Or-
yes, I did. Not
Wow.
those parties, because those parties are a little bit younger. I was a bit too young for those parties. I would have been about 10 years old then. But we went to the ones after that, which were more, again, they were like in 86, 85. I used to go to blues at that time, which became a little bit less. Reggae was sort of coming out a little bit. It was much more like American soul music was coming in then. So yeah, there you go.
I mean, all the movies deal with some serious subject matter, but they're also just such a joyous celebration of love and family and music and food. How did you sort of, keep that all the way through filming and editing, keep that tone, keep that joy?
I think this, as you said before, there's the senses, the celebration of the senses. I think, the food and smell and obviously the hearing, and the sexuality was very much something I wanted to sort of cover through all the 5 films. And again, it was easy because sort of I lived it, and I experienced it, and it was very easy to do. I mean, again, if you think of someone like, I don't know, you see the Scorsese doing something, Italian American, he's talking to his mum and dad, or he's doing something, Mean Streets. It's something you grow up with, so it's second nature. Second nature.
How did the pandemic affect your work at all? Had you shot everything before the shutdown?
We shot most of it. Most of it we did. We did some reshoots, some pickups. I basically wrote some more scenes for Red, White, and Blue.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was interesting because when we came back, I shot and went to some new scenes for Red, White, and Blue. And what happened was that at that time, John Boyega had done that speech in Hyde Park, and funny enough, in front of 5,000 people in Hyde Park, very emotional speech. And the funny thing is Leroy Logan was in the audience in Hyde Park, strangely enough. Yeah. And then a few weeks after that, I think a week after that, a few weeks after that, John came back to shoot the scene in the pool room. He said he needed something. I said, well, I got the scene for you. And that's when, you get that rage and that sort of, intensity. So, I think, at some point, we influenced John influenced us. And it was interesting how art and that particular subject matter on that march for George Floyd happened. And, he was shooting that scene, as a black policeman. So it was crazy, it happens.
I mean, did you have to do a lot of post-production?
Yes, I was editing here. I was editing in the Netherlands. I was editing in my studio here. So that was fun. That was fun. And again, after a while, unfortunately, my co-editor Chris Dickens had to go to London. But then we were editing remotely, which is fun. I liked it. I don't think Chris was very happy about it, but it worked. It worked very well. It worked very well. We had this sort of remote editing equipment, and I loved it. I loved it. I mean, the fact that the reason why I loved it, I imagine, because I had work to do during the COVID. I could focus, and I was very fortunate. Yeah.
I mean, this is such a broad question, but what do you think was your biggest challenge on this anthology? Was there a moment or a day where, things were harder than usual, or were you just so happy to finally tell these stories after 11 years?
Hardest. I think the first day, I didn't, I was very surprised at myself. I didn't sleep the whole night. Mm. And I thought, shit, I've been around the block a couple of times. I mean, I'm not sort of, an elder statesman of filmmaking at all. But I thought, okay, I've done a few films, and but that night before the first day of shooting, I didn't sleep all night. I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep a wink. And it's interesting because everything I do, I always think is possibly the last thing I do. You have to think like that. So I try to do the very best of anything I do. And I think that was it, really. So that was the hardest thing, really. That first night I couldn't sleep. I was very, very nervous. I was very, very nervous. I thought, don't know why, but that was very hard. It was very hard. That was the hardest thing, not sleeping or wink. But also, I think fear is a very good thing, and how you harness it, and how you sort of, greet it. Because fears will come. It's like, embrace fear. Well, hi, fear, how are you? Nice to see you. Hey, come along over here. So somehow you normalize it in a way. So I think that was one of the hardest things, really. Yeah.
What was the first film you shot?
Oh, it was Mangrove.
That's Mangrove. What I thought. Okay.
And then it was Mangrove, and then it was it Alex Wheatle next? No, it was Lovers Rock after Mangrove, and after Lovers Rock, Alex Wheatle. And Alex Wheatle, we shot Red, White, and Blue. No. Education, and then Red, White, and Blue. Red, White, and Blue was the last one, I think. Well, Education was the last one. Education was the last one.
Now, after working on this for so long, and it is such an epic project, and I'm so happy that here in America, it's on Amazon Prime, where everyone can see it. Even my mom knows how to get Amazon Prime, which I love. So she's been able to watch it, and people have been able to have conversations about it, and the response has been so enthusiastic. How does it feel, to have accomplished this after so long?
No, it feels good. It feels good. I think the thing that feels wonderful to me is that something so, local could go global, and that people understand it, people appreciate it, and people champion it. Because we've been very fortunate how people responded to Small Acts in many ways. Having 2 films in Cannes, and 3 New York Film Festival, and XYZ sort of recognition all over the world. So it's been pretty amazing, and it just humbles me in a way, because it just makes me sort of so glad that people recognize things which aren't necessarily so familiar with them, but they see themselves in it. Mm-hmm. I don't think you could actually see anything which you can't relate to in one way, shape, form, or the other. So the fact that people have seen the humanity in it and recognized it is, I'm very happy.
I mean, the older I get, the more I realize that sometimes the more specific the story is, the more universal it is for people. And
absolutely. And that's a great thing for people to find out and acknowledge that they think, yes, you are important. Your story is important.
Yeah. Well, it's such a fantastic anthology. I want to remind everyone that it's all 5 films are available on Amazon Prime. I want to thank you so much for being here today. And again, congratulations times 5 on this achievement.
You're very kind. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'd love to see you again. Bye-bye.
You too.